Good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to today's webinar, 7 Secrets of Mobile App Integration for J.D. Edwards. My name is Glenn Johnson. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Magic Software Enterprises, and we're pleased to bring you today's webinar so that we can share with you information about building mobile apps that are connected with J.D. Edwards that provide the business functionality that you need in your organization for a variety of different business process requirements that obviously need to run on mobile devices, whether those be smartphones or tablets, and also need to either display or bidirectionally exchange information with J.D. Edwards Enterprise One or J.D. Edwards World on the back end. Magic Software is a platinum partner of Oracle. We are pleased to have achieved the Oracle Validated Integration for J.D. Edwards Enterprise One and the Oracle Validated Integration for J.D. Edwards World designations for our Magic XPI integration platform, which provides the capability for connecting the apps that we'll be talking about today. And this is a variety of different apps that you can build. There's not really a limit on the business process that you choose to address. It's really a matter of your business need and requirement. So we're going to get into all of that in today's webinar. I'm joined today on the webinar by Andy Bowie, so I want to welcome Andy to the conversation. Andy, thanks for joining us.
No problem.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. If you have a question at any time, please feel free to type that into the chat box or to the question and answer box. The chat box is private between you and us, and the Q&A box, everyone can see your name when you type in the question. So keep that in mind, but we'd be happy to take questions in either mode at the conclusion of the formal presentation. As we begin, what we'd like to do is simply talk about J.D. Edwards integration, perhaps in a more general sense, and then move into the specific challenges related to mobile, the 7 challenges that we wanted to address today. So first of all, in terms of how do we integrate to J.D. Edwards, most of you know, of course, that there are ways of doing this, and depending upon your version, how you integrate is going to change. There's essentially an API or capability for integrating with J.D. Edwards. With World A7.3, the method that's provided is essentially Z-file processes. This is a proprietary flat file format from J.D. Edwards, and we can utilize that to accomplish and achieve integration with your older version of J.D. Edwards. Now, we certainly encourage you to upgrade, just like any loyal Oracle partner would do, but we're basically Switzerland here at Magic Software. We work with all vendors. We work with all versions of your software, and so we certainly can provide you with the integration capabilities so that you can run mobile apps with those older versions of J.D. Edwards. It's not impossible. It's, in fact, very easily accomplished. The other dimension of World, of course, are newer versions. So J.D. Edwards World 9 and above supports some business services. So we have a component that works with both the Z-file processes and some of the newer business services that are available in World 9.x. But what we would suggest to you there is that we use the services when they're available, and when they're not, then the flat file approach is utilized for integration with World. Most of you, however, are probably on Enterprise One, and since Enterprise One supports a different approach to integration called a business function, it also has the Z-file processes available in most instances, but the business function is typically the preferred method of integration. So we try to work with the business functions when they're available with Enterprise One, and with World, or when necessary, we use the Z processes and flat files for integration. All of these are automated. It's not just a matter of resorting to manual processes, but you have automated tools for doing so. And so when you're doing mobile integration, you want to look for a mobile integration platform or an integration platform in general that works with those business functions with XML, that has the capability of doing the unusual and the important. And the unusual and the important can be things like compositing application logic from RPG or COBOL, or an IBM I command line, or from Java classes and Java objects, or COM and C, C++, perhaps even a call out to the odd.NET application, so the ability to deal with calling that .NET code. And you don't want to have to write more program code to deal with this. You just simply want to be able to utilize those routines that are there so that you can get a parameter back, bring that into a business process flow that's being dealt with by a business analyst. You want to be able to do business process modeling and orchestration, data mapping and transformation, and monitoring. So in other words, you want an elegant approach, one that allows you to be compliant with enterprise security standards, to be scalable for the requirements of enterprise class performance, and to be SOA compliant for a service-oriented approach for those of you who have adopted the reusability standards of SOA. And when it comes to mobile, of course, you need to be able to support a bring your own device type of policy, or a multi-device policy, if you will, so that you support multiple operating systems, but it goes much further than just multiple operating systems. You're supporting different device types, the smartphone, the tablet. These are very different worlds because of the size and the capabilities of these devices, and different versions of operating systems can be quite dramatic. And then, of course, once you get outside of the world of iOS, particularly in the area of Android, there are multiple vendors of these devices that often have flavors of the offering that you need to pay attention to as well. So all of that can cause for a great deal of consternation as an IT department if you're thinking you have to deal with all these different capabilities. That's why we're talking about today an application platform that gives you the ability to integrate to these various deployment types, various client types, so that you can deploy your apps in the manner that is needed, while at the same time having that back-end connection to JD Edwards. So what are the challenges, the secrets, if you will, that we need to be talking about? I think some of the things that people talk to us most often about are, how do we authenticate our users? Is the data secure when it's moving to and from the mobile device? How do we work with all the different APIs and systems that are out there? What happens if the device goes offline? How can I develop an offline mobile app for JD Edwards? How do I handle requests from large numbers of clients? Scalability is a common concern. How can mobile apps access enterprise data? And will I have to learn a bunch of new programming languages in order to do all of this? Those are challenges. Those are questions that people legitimately have. And the good news today is that there are great answers for all of these. It's not rocket science. It's not as obscure or complex a solution as you might think. And the good news is that what we have to show you today is comprehensive, effective, and overcomes all of these challenges that you see listed here and more. So let's talk about how that needs to be done. First of all, identity management is one of the secrets, one of the things that you need to be able to deal with in order to have an effective mobile strategy for JD Edwards. And this means that you need to comply with your governance policies. All of you, of course, have very established approaches and procedures to authenticating your JD Edwards users today. But if you throw a mobile app out there that's something new that you've created and it's simply integrated to JD Edwards on the back end, then you have to ask yourself the question, are we utilizing the LDAP, Active Directory? Are we JD Edwards user authentication? What kind of passwords, approach is being taken here for authentication of those users? Are you going to use OAuth or Active Directory or LDAP or, some other kind of approach? So you need to have user authentication capabilities built into the integration platform and application platform that you use to create those mobile apps and deliver them. That needs to be able to deal with the user rights. It's not necessary that you give all rights to anyone who happens to be integrated to the back-end platform. That's an easy way to do it, but with mobile devices, probably not such a good idea. The second thing that we mentioned is, the whole idea of encrypted transport. How do we, overcome this challenge? Well, the transport layer security needs to be built in to the integration and application solution that you utilize. Encrypted XML transport means that you can utilize a variety of different encryption algorithms, whether that be things like RSA or DES3 or Blowfish, various levels of RC2, 4, 5, IDEA, or CAST. Magic XPI integration platform and Magic XPA application platform, I'll just throw in the commercial here, supports all of these, obviously. So a transport layer that is secure, storage that is secure on the client side of your mobile device, as well as on the server side, is absolutely essential to support your enterprise policies related to security. And that's built in and included in all of the technology that we provide. You also just want that ease of use factor that comes from having a library of pre-built components that are built for environments that you work with frequently, whether that be something like IBM Lotus Notes or Microsoft SharePoint. Maybe you have a back-end system that you work with for CRM, or a cloud-based system, something like Salesforce. Whatever those are, having pre-built adapters and resources for those is very useful, and also for the various kinds of technologies that are exposed by applications in their APIs. Web services, both SOAP and RESTful web services, JSON, whether you want to work with messaging queues or various kinds of communication protocols, HTTP, obviously, XML, and so on. And so having a component library that's mobile ready is really going to simplify the development and maintenance of integration to the various third-party applications as well. And with Magic XPI's integration platform for JD Edwards, you have a wide variety of components that give you the ability to work not only with applications, but as we said, with various kinds of resources and methods, and we'll talk about some of those logical capabilities later on as well. So the fourth question that people often ask is, what if the application or the device goes offline? I no longer have a wireless signal or a mobile signal. Then what do we do? Well, you have the ability to have an always-on approach to building your applications, so that when you are working without a server connection, you can have cached data and application capabilities on the device itself. Now, if you're going to do that, of course, you're probably going to want just a subset of relevant server data or client data locally on the client, not the entire database. How your business rule defines what is relevant for that particular user is up to you. But this is an important capability to be able to work in that offline mode, and then when communication is reestablished, to synchronize that app. So we provide capabilities for startup sync, so that you have sync when you first start that application. When you go into offline mode, we provide the ability for re-authenticating the user, because you've lost that connection now. You need to authenticate the user in an offline fashion without the server being able to help you out in that process. You need to be able to utilize those local resources, the locally stored data and images and so on. You need to then, when communication is reestablished, to do the master-to-master synchronization or the various kinds of patterns that you might use. Now, probably it's going to be a master-master pattern, which you use for the data synchronization. But it could be that you have the type of data where the user of the mobile app is always right. That could be your business rule. And so that could be kind of more of a master-slave. Or you could have, last in, as the preference for what the master is and so on. So you have various kinds of business rules that you could track the date and time stamp of the interaction and utilize that. But generally speaking, you're going to want an environment for a master-master pattern, and when you detect conflicts, you're going to need a process for dealing with those conflicts, and you're going to need a way to resolve that either logically or through communications with the users to have them clarify when those real conflicts are detected. But it is all possible, and it's all built in so that you have those capabilities for applying your business rules for your situation and use of those mobile apps. The fifth question that we hear a lot is, how do we deal with scale? How do we, you have lots and lots of users, because we're going to have, hundreds, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of users on a system that could be utilizing these mobile apps and trying to access our JD Edwards system. We need to make sure that we can handle the amount of communication that's being requested and broker all of that communication. Well, Magic's technology provides in-memory computing capability for all of that, so that when you're queuing those requests, you're doing so in memory. The messaging layer, if you will, is all taking place in memory, so that the server is able to deal with a very large number of parallel requests. It's called dynamic scaling. We utilize co-location of memory and processing capabilities so that you have a grid, and that means that you have high availability as a result as well. So that co-location approach allows you to make sure that there's always another area of memory and processing available for an incoming request, and also it executes it more quickly because the writing to the database is now basically an archival process, and you can actually get the response that the process has been completed before writing to the physical database. And the physical database on disk, of course, is very time-consuming portion of the process versus what's happening in memory. So by considering the process to be completed in memory, you have a much faster turnaround time for those processes. And this enables then, what we call dynamic scaling. The linear scalability is achieved. You get elasticity. You have hot backup for failover requirements. It's a very slick solution. Now, the other dimension of that, though, as we said, is that there is that process of writing to the database. You want to make sure that you have native gateways for the database and really native capabilities throughout. So in the solution that we're talking about, you have native clients in the mobile environments, whether that be iOS or Android, BlackBerry, Windows, and so on. Or you also have, as we said, native database gateways. And native database gateway is really defined as a high-speed optimized gateway for that specific database, whether that be Microsoft SQL or obviously Oracle, .NET, excuse me, not .NET, IBM DB2, and so on. There are also platform frameworks such as .NET and Java. Now, the high-speed nature of the database gateways that you see mentioned here, as well as those that are not listed, this is not an attempt to be comprehensive in the listing, are important. It's also important to note, however, that there are some databases which are ODBC optimized in and of themselves, and MySQL is actually a good example of that. MySQL is built on the concept of ODBC, from the ground up, whereas something like Oracle is optimized to have its own native gateway. So, or in the same case with SQL Server or DB2. So in some cases, ODBC connection is the preferred method, the native method for that particular database environment, and that happens to be the case with MySQL. So native gateways, very important. It's very easy to set them up. You simply designate the host system, and you can connect your Magic XPA or your Magic XPI to your Oracle database system. Utilize that for all of the database transactions that are part of your business processes. These are the business processes related to the mobile server, the business processes related to the integration server, and so on. Now, when it comes to applying your business rules, you're going to want to be able to leverage logic that is simple, straightforward, doesn't require you to learn a lot of different programming languages, right? So we're not asking you to learn a new programming language in order to do any of this. What we are asking you to do is to be able to use an integration platform and to use an application platform that have an expression editor. An expression editor is a one-line editor, so that you can, in these visual process flows, when you get a dialog box open and there's a transformation that needs to occur, for example, of data between in a data map from point A to point B, this is a point at which an expression could be used to do something as simple as a concatenate or a join, or perhaps something more complex, such as an actual arithmetic algorithm or some sort of logical comparisons and so forth. So those are always possible as well. And so applying those business rules through an expression editor as well as through visual integration process flows that have various types of flow logic built into them is a very powerful tool that allows you to avoid having to learn new programming languages. You don't need to learn how to program in Objective-C in order to have iOS apps for JD Edwards. You don't need to learn how to program in Java in order to have a BlackBerry app or Java in order to have an Android app and so on. You can actually utilize this higher level interface, create those apps, and then deploy them to any of those environments in a native fashion, which is really exciting, so that you actually get a native client as the result of all that. And the great thing about both the integration and the application development is that they all use the same logical expressions, so that your trims and concatenates and joins and all that are using the universal expression editor. It executes in instance-driven fashion so that there's no line-by-line programming required. Very cool. We'll show you that in the demonstration, how all this sort of comes together quite beautifully. So to summarize the 7 secrets, we talked about JD Edwards integration in the beginning. We talked about your capabilities for identity management being something you want to make sure you have, to be able to have a secure transport layer. You want to make sure you have a healthy and extensive integration component library with both application adapters as well as technology adapters or protocol adapters, if you will. You want to be able to work in both offline and online mode, create applications that have 2 different types of business application logic, essentially, based on whether you're online or offline. You want to have high scalability through a request brokering system that uses an in-memory computing approach. You want to have high-speed database gateways and native capabilities across the board for both back-end connectivity and your front-end multi-channel deployment of business applications. And you want to have simple metadata-driven application development and integration that utilizes simple expression editors and visual development tools and data and table-driven development approaches, as opposed to the complexity of learning 6 or 7 different programming languages that would be necessary to support a BYOD strategy for JD Edwards otherwise. And I think when you make that evaluation and you look at the certifications and the experience that Magic Software brings to the table for this, that's a pretty powerful option for you to consider. We offer a 30 days to app service as well, so that you can provide us with a defined application service definition, requirements definition, and we can deliver that JD Edwards integrated app to you 30 days later for testing. And that's it can be faster, but I mean we call it 30 days to app, and we think that that's a very reasonable, liberal time period for the creation of any type of JD Edwards application, JD Edwards integrated application, a mobile app that you might want to use. And that can be a mashup to other systems as well, Salesforce or whatever you might happen to have in your environment, your e-commerce platforms, and so on. So with that discussion, what we want to do now is actually go hands-on. And I'm going to change presenters now so that Andy's desktop can be shared with us, and we can actually see a live system that will show us a big piece of what we've been talking about here. Andy?
All right, thanks, Glenn. So for this demonstration is going to be mainly 3 parts. The first part, we're going to go ahead and go through the process of developing and deploying a mobile application to an Android tablet or a Nexus 7 device, to be specific. And the way I'm going to show you guys is we're using a Nexus 7 emulator to emulate a Android device. The second and kind of third part of demonstration will be going over another application, a more complex application than the one that we're going to develop today in today's session. But we're going to go over that application, and we're going to show you how we integrate to JDE and also kind of what other features are out there when it comes to mobile applications. Now, when we integrate to JDE, it's going to segue into our third part of the demonstration, which is showing our integration platform and basically how we have our mobile application communicating with our back-end server to handle the integration end. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to my XPA development server, and what we see in front of us is our Magic XPA Studio. Right now it's just on the recent projects selected, but what we're going to go ahead and do is create a new project. So for this project, I'll go ahead and call it My First App. Okay. Now, when we create the application, we're taken to our next menu, which kind of shows all of our repositories. But the ones that we're concerned about today is basically just the models repository and the programs repository. And basically what the models repository is it's a library of models that we can use for objects or data types or specific fields, such as maybe I'm using a date or specific numeric picture or value or format throughout my project. I can go ahead and create these models here so I can easily point and assign a model to a control in my project. The other repository I was speaking about is our programs repository, which contains all of our application's logic, user interface, as well as server or back-end transactions. Okay. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and take a dive into our installation directory, and what we see here is our XPA Suite installation directory. Now, there's several folders, but the main folder I want to take a look at is our projects folder. When we create a new project, it creates a folder in this directory for every single project. And if I go into our application, we can go ahead and see what's in there. Right now, it's a brand new application, so there isn't much, but we have our source code, which are stored in the form of XML. For our Magic XPA and XPI applications, it's everything we do is sorted in XML. That's how we are able to attain portability, easy portability and maintainability throughout our environments. Now, while we're in these, what I want to go ahead and do is I've prepared a couple of style sheets. And basically what we have are exports of our forms. And what I mean by forms is our user interface for our Nexus 7 applications. In the past, we've developed multiple Nexus 7 applications. And what we've had to do is actually go through and create from scratch our Nexus 7 dimensions, as well as importing, as well as assigning background images, and basically style sheets for our Nexus 7 device. So rather than having to manually create these on this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and use them from previous projects. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste my style sheets to my my first app project directory, and I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my XPA Studio. Now, the application we're going to create today is just a simple, welcome screen application. The application will have a banner at the top of the screen, as well as a button that will trigger a pop-up message on our device. Okay? So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and import my style sheets. I'm going to go to my Export Import Wizard, and this is basically where I can choose whether or not to export previous models that I've used, which I did to create these style sheets, and then I can import said style sheets to whichever project I'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate. I'll go ahead and import my models and my properties. Okay. Now when I kick out of here, we'll go ahead and see that my models repository now has 37 entries. Now we won't need all the 37 entries. This was the live export of a live project, so that's why there's so many. But all we need is really this first form design. So let's go ahead and create our first program. I'm going to go ahead and call this program Welcome. And we'll give this a public name, and it's going to be an external program. And this will come, that public name and that external program will come out again when we deploy our application. Okay, so let's go ahead and just make a mental note. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom, and when I create a new program, it's going to list, it's going to prompt me to assign the program properties. Now this is going to be a mobile or rich internet application, and it's going to be interactive because it's going to have a user interface, which is that button and that welcome screen. Every other field can be left as default, but as you can see, we have other tabs here where we can control basically the functionality of the program we're creating. Will the user be able to modify data on this program? Will they be able to create new records in our database? We can handle when the transactions begin and occur. Okay, so I'll go ahead and press OK and create a new. Since this is a rich internet application, I'm going to go ahead and create a dummy variable. But basically what you're seeing here is 3 separate tabs. We have our data view tab, our logic tab, and our forms tab. And as you can kind of guess, each tab pertains to which property, the properties of the application and the configuration of the program. So under the data view, if I was accessing a data source or a specific database, I would assign that. One repository I looked over was our data repository. Now, since this application won't be actually accessing a database, we don't have any data sources defined here. But if I were accessing a database with my application, like most applications do, this is where I would assign. This is where I would have the references to the tables from within the database. So going back into my program, so we established we do not have a database. Our logic tab will go ahead and put this on pause right now, and we'll go ahead and jump into our forms editor. Our form editor is our UI editor. If I go ahead and zoom into my welcome screen right now, what we have is a blank canvas, okay, and the dimensions are set to the default dimensions. Now, what we're working here is with that Nexus 7 device. So what I want to go ahead and do is assign the model that we imported, which is the form first design. And now when I go into my view, we can see that the dimensions of the screen have been readjusted, and we also have a background image now. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and add some controls to our screen. As I mentioned before, we're simply just going to have a welcome banner. Okay, I'll go ahead and say welcome. And then I can perform a couple of quick commands on the control. I have my center to screen, so I can center my object to the center of the form. I also have the vertical center, but for now I want it to be at the top since it's a banner. I can also go into the properties pane, which is on the left here, and I can change the font of the control. Let's go ahead and make the font size a little bit bigger. Okay, font size 14, and I'll go ahead and center the text. Right now it's left justified. I'll go ahead and go into the center. One last control that I want to perform is the fit size, which will go ahead and just minimize the amount of space that my control is taking. And I'll recenter one more time. Okay. Now, the last item we need to add to our application today is simply the button. And what I mentioned before is this button is just simply going to raise a pop-up message. And the reason why we want to add this button is for 2 specific reasons. The first reason is so I can show you guys the logic tab of the logic tab of the program, and also the model that we have with our XPA, which is what you see is what you get, as well as pulling in the native look and feel of the operating system that we're executing this application on. And what I mean by that is if we take a look at this button right now, it's currently using it looks like a Windows button. But I want you guys to go ahead and pay attention to this, and when we deploy to our Nexus 7 device, you'll see that the button actually does not look like a Windows button, and it's taken on the native look and feel of the Android operating system. So it'll look like a native Android button. And the way we achieve this throughout all of the platforms, whether it is iOS, Android, or Windows Mobile, is by using the actual native SDKs for these operating systems. When we're creating the APK, which is the installation file for Android, or the IPA file, which is the installation for iOS or iPhones, we're actually using the native SDKs for those development environments in order to create those installation files. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish designing our application. Under the button, I'll go ahead and press Click Me. Once again, I'll go ahead and center to form, fit size, and center to form one more time. We'll go ahead and drag this down a little bit more. Okay, and in terms of controls, our application is completed. Now there's a little bit of a logic we're going to need to apply. As Glenn mentioned, XPA requires little to no coding. The way we do this is by having our controls under our UI or form editor, and then under our logic tab, you're going to go ahead and see what kind of steps or quote-unquote coding we'll have to perform. So currently we have an empty button, and right now when this button is pressed, in terms of development, there's no event assigned to the button. So I'll go ahead and assign it an event right now. Under the project or the control properties, we have a raise event field. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the event type as a user-defined event and create a new event. I'll give this event name button 1. Okay. And basically what I've done now is I've assigned an event to this button. When this button is selected, it's going to raise the button 1 event. But what happens when the button 1 event is risen? That's where our logic tab comes into play. We're going to go ahead and create a new line, go to events, and select the event that I just created, button 1. And after that, all I need to do is punch in a little bit of code, which is my verify pop-up message, and we'll go ahead and call this, say, hello world. Okay? And we want it to be displayed in a pop-up box. All right. So our application is completed. Let's go ahead and run our syntax checker. I'll go to options, check syntax. Everything checks out in the bottom left corner. Program is okay. The last thing to do is to go ahead and build our project and then create our APK file since we're deploying to Android today. So to build, I'm going to go ahead and go to File, Create Cabinet, and create what is called an ECF file. This is the native build file for our XPA development platform. Now the last thing to do is to go ahead and deploy the application. So I'm going to go to my interface builder, Rich Client Deployment, and here I'm in my Rich Client Deployment wizard. Now before we continue, I'm going to go ahead and go through every screen and show you the significance of each screen in terms of our deployment. Now, now what we're creating is a true client-side application. And what I mean by that is the hierarchy of how mobile applications or rich internet applications work with Magic XPA is we're basically creating on whatever platform, creating a client application that simply has a pointer to our application server, which is our XPA broker, and also has a stored application name within the client. So when the client is executed, all it simply does is establish a connection to our application server and tell the application server which application to execute on the device. Now please note this is for online applications. Magic XPA does support offline applications, as Glenn mentioned, where the metadata would be stored rather on the device instead of the server, thereby achieving offline functionality by definition. But for today's example, we're simply going over online applications. So let's go ahead and step through. On the first screen, I have this application's history of deployment. Since this is a new application, we don't have any, so I'll go ahead and select new. On this first screen, we have the details of the application. These are details that a user can see on their device. So here is the application name, which will be the name displayed on the device. I'll go ahead and add spaces for grammatical correctness. And also I can add an application description, name, copyright, and also note version code and version name. in the event that your application will be going through multiple versioning, it's good to kind of keep track of what version the APK is. Next is my server information. This is the information of where our application server will be hosted. As I mentioned before, when the client application is executed, it needs to know where the server is and how to connect to it. And on this screen is where we configure it. So I'll go ahead and assign my fully qualified name for my development environment, dev2.magic-inc.com. Okay, and all the other fields can be left as default. Basically, these other fields, the Magic XPA scripts and the published application alias, are referring to virtual directories created on my under my IIS configuration on my development server. And these virtual directories are automatically created when you install the XPA suite. Okay, going next, I have my execution command. On this screen, we're configuring what application to execute when the client application is executed. As I mentioned again, there's two main points of our client applications. Where's our application server and what application to execute. Furthermore, we have a start program name where we designate which program to execute initially when our mobile application is first started up. Now, as I mentioned, when we created that first program in our application, I said that the external name or the external and the public name would come back up. So here we see start, which was the public name that I had assigned to my one and only application. Of course, this is just a simplified example. Since we only have one program, we can only have one start program name. But in the event where I would have multiple screens, say a login screen taking me to a grocery list or to an inventory list, of course I would want my login screen to be booted up first. So this is the screen where I would designate that. Okay, moving on to the next screen, I have a checklist of which environments that I'm deploying to. As mentioned, we're going to deploy to Android today. Okay, and then go ahead and select yes. And on the last screen, this is our Android settings screen. Since I selected Android, we need to go ahead and point to our Android SDK. As I mentioned, we're using the native Android SDK in order to achieve our native look and feel for the operating system that the application is being hosted on. So I'll go ahead and point to my Android SDK, and I'll know that I've pointed to a valid SDK when I can see what platform levels there are. Today we're going to be deploying to Android API level 18, which is, I believe, Android OS 4.3. Okay, I'll go ahead and click Finish, and now what's going to happen is it's going to create my APK file. Now, we don't see any progress indicator here, but if I go into my XPA installation directory and select my RIA modules, Android, and source, it's executing this batch right now, which is basically, it has a lot of pointers. Under my settings property, which is one of the fields that it's using, here it's generated where the Android SDK is. It's also generated the target API level, as well as all the information that we basically configured in the wizard. And when it's completed, what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead and create my APK and store my APK under my published applications. Here we can see the My First App. We have the operating system we're deploying to. And right now, since it's working, it doesn't have the APK yet. Now, also what we've done for our development server is we've enabled directory browsing in our IIS configuration to be enabled for this folder. That way, we have an easy way of accessing our APK file on our devices. So all we have to do is open the browser, go to the URL that's been created by IIS, and download our APK from there. That just kind of provides an easier way to access it rather than having to plug your device into your laptop, navigating through the device's file system, and then storing it there or emailing yourself the APK. Okay, so here we have our link for where we can access our APK. So the last thing to do is we'll go ahead and start the server, our application server for the My First App. We'll wait for that to boot up, and then we'll go ahead and switch over to our emulator. Okay. Let me go ahead and delete our previous. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to our browser, and I'll navigate to our development server, dev2.magic-inc.com, and our applications is our Magic RIA Applications 24B. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and look through all my published applications. We have the My First App, so I'll select that, We're deploying to Android, and now we can see that we have our APK, and it was generated today at 10/28/11:45 a.m. Okay, so I'll go ahead and download this file, and I'll go ahead and install the application. Should just take a few seconds, and I'll go ahead and select Open. And now we have our loading screen, and we have our application. Now the button got cut off a little bit, so we need to modify the button size. But while speaking of the button, we can now see that it's not a Windows button. It actually has that transparency and kind of has that Android looking feel to it. Now selecting the button, we should get a pop-up message that says Hello World. And just like that, in about 15 minutes, we went ahead and designed an application from scratch and deployed it to our Nexus 7 emulator. Okay, so let's go ahead and take another look into an application that we've created. Another application we've created. The application I'm going to show you guys is our Pharma app, and this was basically an application that we created with the mindset of for a pharmaceutical company, where the salespeople need to go door to door and create orders or update contacts. And the main screen that we're going to be going over today is the contacts. This application is has a call to one of our XPI, which is our integration projects, to create entries in several end systems. So I'll go ahead and go to my Add Contact and show you kind of the systems that we have, just to give you an idea of how this application works. Under the application name, we have a choice for all of this end systems that we can create this contact in. JDE1, World, Salesforce, SAP-R3, Sugar, CRM, Dynamics, or SharePoint. Today we're going to be deploying to JDE Enterprise 1. Okay? And before we go through that, I'll go ahead and show you guys in the back end what's happening. Okay? Let me close this project, and I'll go ahead and open up my Magic demo, which is our Pharma app. And basically, the main screen that we're going to be taking a look at today is our Add Contact. Now, quickly, what I wanted to go and show you guys is mainly this function right here. Under this expression, when we select the Save button, we're raising the event to Save Contact. And under my logic view, under Save Contact, it performs various steps. But the main step that I want to show you guys is this HTTP post. We're posting to our XPI demo server under our internet requester DLL, and sending it an XML. Okay. For now, that's all we'll worry about. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our XPI environment now. And here's our XPI studio. As you can tell, the studio is a lot different than our XPA studio. Under XPA, we say what you see is what you get, little to no coding. Under XPI, the methodology is drag, drop, and configure. As you can see on the right here, we have what we call flows. And basically, flows are flows of data and flows of logic. In the blue, what you see is conditions. We'll take a dive into this in a second, but what I mainly wanted to show is that under our XPI project, what we've done is create and expose an HTTP service. And when the service is called, it's expecting a set of parameters. These parameters are coming from, these parameters are being filled in and coming in from we're using a RESTful API, which by definition means that the that the parameters are stored within the URL. Is this the only way to use HTTP services in XPI? No, you don't need to abide by the RESTful API, but in this specific example, we are. Now, what I'm trying to show you guys is that when we click that Save Contact button in our Pharma app, it's actually calling this HTTP service and performing the logic. And what we're doing is all the parameters from that form are being sent to our XPI project. We're assigning it to variables in our XPI project. And then from there, through various condition gates, we're calling our JDE E1 component and creating a new contact. And the way we do this is, with our JDE component, we have our JDE resource. Okay. So under our settings, we have our JDE server name, our username, password, etc. And what we're doing is, after we've established a valid JDE server, what our XPI component does is it populates a list of business functions that are within that JDE server, which I'm going to load right now. And in this case, since we're adding contacts, we're using our address book master. So you don't need to necessarily be a JDE expert, but you do need to know what business functions that you are calling. So here I have several of my JDE contacts. I can just select one of them. I'll perform get. And there's a list of business functions. And as I mentioned, you don't need to be a JDE component in order to know every single one. You just need to know that your exact business function. I'm no JDE component, so I don't know exactly what every context on our JDE server here. But regardless, the main one that we're looking for is the address book master, which has the module name N01000041. Okay? After we went ahead and said that we're performing a query on this this JDE function, it goes ahead and creates our schema for, or not creates, but gives us our schema for that specific function. In this instance, it's to create a contact. Okay, and all of our what we do is with that schema, we're able to map to it. So before, as I mentioned, when we call this HTTP service, we're getting all of our parameters stored into variables. And now what I'm doing is I have my data mapper, and I'm mapping an XML, which is using the schema that was generated by our JDE component here. So if I go under JD Edwards schema in our server, we have our address book member schema. And what I'm simply doing is I'm mapping my data to that specific schema in order to create my contact. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this in action. I'm going to go ahead and create a new contact. We'll go ahead and call this contact Andy Johnson. Okay, and right now I'm in my JDE server. I just want to verify that this account has not been created. This contact has not been created yet. Okay, and it doesn't look like we have any results. All right, so let's go ahead and switch back to our application. I'm going to go ahead and add a new contact. Sorry, give me 1 second. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly fill out this form and just create a new contact just to show you guys that we are able to successfully deploy, create a contact in our JDE E1 environment. Okay, so the name that I wanted to go with was Andy Johnson. We'll say ajohnson@magic.com. On the address, we'll have 1234 place. Zip code is 92705. City, Laguna Hills. Country is U.S. Number, we'll use our office number, 1718. Company MSC. Say created 1028. And we'll go ahead and select our JDE E1. And when I click Save, we're going to get a pop-up message. Looks like a warning, but basically we're just going over and making sure that our URL that we're sending to our HTTP service is correct. As I mentioned before, we're using the RESTful API, so this is basically how the end of the URL storing the parameters is going to look. After this, it's going to perform its logic on the XPI server, and we should be returned with a JDE address book entry number in the form of a pop-up. So we'll go ahead and wait for this message to come up, and then we'll go ahead and check and cross-reference it with our JDE server to ensure that it was created successfully. Okay, so we have our JDE address book number 79927. So if we go ahead and switch back over to our JDE, we can search for Andy Johnson again. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and try and search it by the JDE address book number. Oops. I believe it was 77. Oh, let's go ahead and open up our monitor. Sorry, give me 1 second. I shouldn't have closed that pop-up. And we created the account at 79927. Now what I've done is this is our XPI monitor, which gives us a kind of a user interface to our XPI server. When an XPI application is completed, by definition, all integration be handled automatically and on the back end. This just gives us kind of an insight to what's happening on the server. So 79927. Go ahead and press find. and we see Johnson Andy, so I was searching under the wrong name. Let's go ahead and select that entry, and we'll go ahead and make sure that our information pulled in okay. All right, so we'll go under mailing, and we can see we have the 1234 place, Laguna Hills, California, U.S. All right, and that's basically the demonstration. So over the demonstration, what we went over was developing and creating an application to deployment onto our Android device. And we also went over an existing application and how we handle mobile integration to JDE E1 using both our application development platform and our integration platform. Glenn, if you wanted to go ahead and open the floor for questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Great demo, and we appreciate it. I want to ask if you have a question, please type it into the chat box or the question and answer box, and we will get to those. We'll give you just a moment to do that. While they're doing that, Andy, maybe you could address just a little bit about the IBM I environment for us, because I know that a lot of our J.D. Edwards users are in IBM I, formerly known as AS400 or iSeries or System I. Now, the servers that Magic provides can run in on a Windows environment. They can run in the IBM I. They can run in Linux or Unix. So what are the capabilities of that System I connector? Can you show that to us and maybe let us see some of those options that are in the drop-down?
Okay, so if I go under my resources, I can go ahead and create a list. So the databases that in question are the DB2 or 400 databases, correct? So in terms of resources, this is a connection to other databases, outside external resources. And basically, under my resource repository, I have a list of all the resources that my project will use. So the one in question is the AS400, correct? So under it, I'll just go ahead and create a new resource. I'll select my DB2 400 option, and we'll see that we have a list of configurations that we need to input: server address, username, password, and library schema name. If we go to any other server, we'll see a different set of configurations. But basically, this is how we would connect to an AS400 resource. Here I have
on the component library itself, Andy, I know we have the System I connector there as well. If we were to drag that into a flow, what would that look like?
Okay, so here we have the configuration. We have several steps. We can either choose, for our System I connector, we can choose a list of methods, as you can see on the screen. And then also, as I mentioned before, you need, in order to perform the System I connector, you need to define the AS400 or the System I that we're connecting to, right? So that would be done under our resource repository.
Great. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. So as you could see there, you had the capabilities for working with the user space, the data queue, the print spool, and very importantly, the command line, so that you can call any program, whether that be RPG, COBOL, ILE, command, any kind of system-level commands as well. So that's excellent. I appreciate that. I don't see any other questions coming in at this point, Andy, so I want to thank you very much for the demonstration and thank all of you for joining us on today's webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email at info@magicsoftware.com or give us a call at 949-250-1718. If you're outside of the U.S., you can find local contact information on the Magic Software website at www.magicsoftware.com. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks to you once again, Andy, for a great demonstration.
All right, no problem. Thanks, Glenn.
See you all later on.